Hi everyone. I'm going to start off with presenting you with a couple of scenarios, and I want you to think about how you might perceive the people in them. So for our first scenario, you see a child in a restaurant screaming and crying. The parents look flustered and at a loss. Nothing they do will calm them down. Everyone is staring. Hands up if you would, 1, feel bad for the parents. 2nd, think the child is a brat. And finally, feel secondhand embarrassment. Yes, that's what I thought. For the second scenario, in one of your classes, there's a student who always needs to be the center of attention, acts out, is always getting in trouble, and called out by the teacher. Hands up if you think this person is attention-seeking, annoying, disruptive, or rude and inconsiderate. Okay, and now it's time for our final scenario. Are you ready? There's a student who always sits in the corner of the cafeteria, won't talk to anyone, and refuses to interact with others. Hands up if you might find them rude or weird. All right. All 3 of the people in these scenarios were me at one time or another. Let me explain a little bit more about what led to these extreme situations. My first memories of struggling with anxiety were when I was about 6 or 7, and right off the bat, a lot of my fears surrounded illness. I was a very picky eater because I thought food would make me sick. I hated car rides because I might get motion sickness. And any time anyone around me complained of feeling sick, I would flee in an attempt to avoid catching anything. I learned as I got older that this has a name, emetophobia. This phobia manifested itself in a lot of tantrums, panic attacks, and avoidance techniques, especially surrounding school. Every morning, I would freak out, hyperventilate, and quite literally had to be dragged to school. I would then often be unable to calm down and spent a lot of my time in the nurse's office. I was also a very bossy child. In hindsight, I realized it was probably an attempt to be in control when I felt out of control in a lot of aspects of my life. My struggles with going to school became so bad that my mom pulled me out of school in the 2nd grade, and I was homeschooled for 4 years. Things were relatively manageable at the time. I saw a couple of different therapists and stayed in my little bubble of safety. When I re-entered school, I was moved ahead of the grade and was then the youngest in my grade 7 class at a small school with very close-knit friend groups. I had trouble making friends, and my anxiety surrounding being in school returned. But I eventually felt I had found my groove, and I was so excited to move on to high school and start fresh. But in October of my grade 9 year, my mom passed away suddenly. I was 13, dealing with the typical freshman problems of making friends and fitting in. I was predisposed to anxiety and depression. And now here I was, dealing with a very monumental loss. On top of this, my dad remarried within a year. So, in a way, I felt as though I had lost both of my parents. I felt so alone. I was so desperate for attention that I became very rebellious. I felt betrayed by my dad, and by the world, quite frankly. So I disobeyed, I skipped school, and when I did show up, I acted out in class and got in trouble a lot. I left for days on end without telling anyone where I was, and I lied and dug my lie holes deeper and deeper. I fought with my parents a lot. We had trouble seeing eye to eye, and I started hanging out with other people who were participating in the same destructive behaviors in an attempt to feel a sense of belonging. These people, who I considered my friends, were only really adding to the issue by not having my best interest in mind. I was surrounded by people, but still felt alone and misunderstood for the most part, all the way until the end of grade 12. I managed to graduate on time, and off I went to college in London, Ontario. I was excited, once again, for a fresh start. But what I got was a downward spiral leading to the darkest time in my entire life. As soon as I arrived at school and moved into my dorm room, I started having night terrors, panic attacks, and major depressive episodes. I had no appetite and barely ate anything. I would stay in bed for days, so overcome with anxiety and sadness that I was unable to attend any of my classes or participate in social activities. My dream of the true college experience was completely squashed. I only made it until Thanksgiving before dropping out and moving back home. I felt totally defeated. I was ashamed and disappointed in myself. I felt as though I would never get the fresh start I had always wanted, and I wallowed in the sadness. In a way, I felt I didn't deserve to be well. My world got smaller and smaller. First, I didn't want to leave my neighborhood, then my house, then my room. The simplest of tasks felt monstrous. I stopped taking care of myself. I didn't shower, go outside, or eat. I just laid in my bed, a constant state of panic that was never ending. My parents witnessed all of this and were at a loss for what to do. They tried to help me in so many different ways, but eventually their only option was to take me to the hospital against my will. This is when I had a revelation of sorts. I had to start taking my mental health seriously. I was put in an intensive outpatient treatment program, which was 4 days a week for 4 hours. My world had become so small that this seemed like the most massive commitment, and in a way, it was. I was overwhelmed and ashamed of the idea of sitting in a room surrounded by mentally ill people. But when I got there on my first day, I was surprised to find myself surrounded by a diverse group of people who I would never expect to be there. There was a successful lawyer, a mother of 3, a fashionable girl around my age. I realized that seeking help wasn't a shameful act, and that more people experience issues with anxiety and depression than I ever could have imagined. It made me feel less alone. Every day, I got up and made my way to the hospital. We talked about our struggles and experiences. We learned a bunch of skills and tools to help us cope. We even did different activities like arts and crafts and sports. I found the program, at least to me, gave me a purpose and a reason to get out of the house, and at most, changed my life. I was actually kind of sad when the program ended, and definitely scared to be thrown back into the real world. But I used the skills I had learned to slowly get back to a normal life. Now, I work 2 jobs, I'm in a healthy and loving relationship, I have a great group of friends, and my relationship with my family is closer than ever. I can honestly say I have never felt better in my life, and I owe it to a few key things that I wish I had known when I was your age. The first key tip, self-acceptance. Accepting that I need a little bit more discipline and care than the average person might, and that's totally okay. This means taking my wellness seriously, investing in myself, and putting consistent work to stay healthy and happy. The second tip, surrounding myself with the right people. My friends are incredibly understanding and compassionate people. They took a while to find, but I'm confident they will be lifelong friends. I wish I'd known in high school how much of an impact the people you surround yourself with has on you. The superficial relationships I once had didn't serve me in any way. I didn't feel free to talk about the way I felt, and judgment, peer pressure, and a lack of understanding led me to feel alone, even in a crowded room. If I could go back, I would have made the effort to find friends who truly supported me and the real struggles I was going through. The final tip, asking for help and actually accepting it. I've had countless therapists over the years, but it wasn't until I truly accepted help that I started to see changes. There is no shame in talking about how you feel. It's so much easier when you don't have to go it alone. If there's one thing I want you to take away from what I've told you today, it's to be understanding. We don't need to understand to offer understanding. We all have a story that impacts the way we think and act. You never know what someone is going through, so try not to judge. Think about what might be causing them to act that way. Also, take care of yourself. Listen to what your body and mind is telling you. Give yourself what you need. Speak up. Ask for help. 1 in 5 people in any given year have a mental illness. So if it's not a friend, it could be you. Thank you.